useless. But he lives in Texas, and I was like, we got on the Zoom, and I was like, "Hey, how are you?" And he's like, and then I was like, "Oh, how's Texas?" And he's like, "It's hot and riddled with COVID." And I was
Yeah,
like, "Yeah,
it's
I don't know
true.
what I was expecting." I mean,
It has consistently been in the high 90s or low hundreds
yeah,
and humid as fuck and
yeah,
disease ridden. Just
yeah,
just I don't I don't know how to put it. Like when you're just like, "Oh yeah, like thousands and thousands of people have this shit and it's like worse here than pretty much anywhere else in the world," and you
yeah.
like walk down the street and you're just like, "Nah, just a bunch of 30 somethings getting wine drunk without masks just
Yeah.
every day." I'm just like,
That's,
"Okay."
it's got to be like the most disheartening thing. Just awful. Like,
Just nobody doing anything to take care
yeah,
of it.
we've been pretty lucky. Like, I mean, Pennsylvania hasn't been the most conservative state or anything, but like, I think it's probably been better than most places.
Yeah.
Um, so we'll see. I mean, yeah.
Um so yeah, I'm trapped in Texas. Anyway, we're going
Anyway,
live.
all right.
Uh
Wait.
so who who are you?
I'm JR Goldberg. Um, yeah. Do you want like a brief description of who
Yeah,
I
yeah,
am?
yeah.
I
Like,
mean,
what do you
I
do?
hate
Why
I
do
hate
people care?
well, I'm not sure anybody does. I think, but yeah. So I'm JR. I design games. I write about pro wrestling. I work in construction, and I think those three things sum me up, I guess.
So it's a weird set of three, dude.
Yeah,
I'm gonna just construction is not a thing I knew anything about. I had no
yeah,
idea you worked in construction. That blows my mind.
yeah. I like to share that because I don't know. Like I think there's maybe I projected this onto myself, but I feel like there's this idea that like game designers, especially game designers of like my cis het ilk, are like pretty bougie in some way. So I like to let people know that like yeah, I put in windows and do renovation stuff.
Just
You
a
know?
weird blue collar dude.
Yeah,
Um,
there you go.
nice. Okay,
Drinking
cool.
a hams and enjoying life.
Yeah, fuck it up. Okay, so construction out of the way. We've got
Yeah,
we've got the two components of the JR I know, which are game shit and wrestling shit.
yeah,
Um,
that's it. And Jew stuff. I guess those are
I
the
guess yeah.
we'll
Well,
probably get
it
them.
kind of blends in. I mean, one
Yeah,
of your game shit is a Jew shit, so like it all
yeah,
it's all
it goes
together.
together. Yep.
Um, yeah, I mean, so like I don't know. I ask a lot of people like, how did you get into this? And I'm just like, you're just a white nerd in the Northeast. Like what? I guess like
Yeah, yeah. So um I guess I'll go back a ways. I mean, I started with D&D.
okay.
When I was a kid, we moved around not a good amount. Like, I'm not one of those kids that moved every year or anything like that. But like, I moved during elementary school, and like at that formative age, it's like always pretty sort of traumatizing, especially for like overweight, socially awkward kid, right? And so the first
So,
friend that I made in my new school
mhm.
uh, was like, "Oh, like you should learn about Dungeons and Dragons." Um, and so that was the big red box at the time. It was second ed.
Yeah.
Um, and I'll tie it into to my Jewish faith as well. So I asked for Dungeons and Dragons because I used to play it at his house. We just played like 1v1 D&D,
Sure.
like where he was the DM and I was like the only player, right? And then like he would have a C2 basically, right? Um, but so I asked my dad for my own set so that we could play at my house too without having to bring everything. And it was Hanukkah, right? So like I asked as a Hanukkah gift for D&D and I got like everything else that I asked for, and then it was the last night of Hanukkah, and and I was like expecting it because I'd asked so many times,
Yeah.
right? And then my dad goes, "I'm gonna give you an important gift this year. Sometimes you don't get everything you ask for." And
I
I
love
was
it.
so pissed off that eventually they like went and got it for me. uh, but yeah, so I played D&D when I was a kid, and then I discovered Magic, I guess, a few years after that, and I played Magic more than I played D&D for like a most of my sort of adolescence, I guess.
Right.
And then when I got to college, I got really close, and I still am, with one of my professors. Um, we're still very very good friends, and so um, by my junior year of college, he invited me to play in his personal D&D game. So I got back into it in college, played D&D, played like a couple other like pretty. That was 3.5.
Okay.
Like we had a pretty good Eberron campaign at the time, and then like we played some like other like normie sort of like combat based games. I guess like the one that like we played Mutants and Masterminds for like a mini campaign. We tried to get a seventh C campaign going, like shit like that,
Sure.
right? Um, and then that was really the extent of it until I started to get into the more like when that's and
Hold
that
on.
was
Your
yeah.
real quick. Your audio was cutting in and out there. Um,
Oh,
say that. I mean, I know what you meant, but
can
for
you
the
hear me?
yeah, I can hear you. For the sake of the recording, though, say the like last line again.
Yeah, so I didn't really get into like designing and really sort of delve in terms of like a personal investment beyond just playing a game until the old school renaissance, old school revival,
Sure.
whatever you want to call it, your BX stuff. So um that was when I started to think about games in a way other than like, oh, someone makes this and then I play it, right? Um there was a like I've always been into punk music. Um, I've always been into like indie stuff in some way, and so it was cool to have a scene that, for a time at least, matched my own sort of personal ethos. And I think if I, even though I don't necessarily feel like the design stuff that I'm known for, if I'm known for anything, has like matched the OSR stuff in any meaningful fashion. I think that without OSR being part of the world for a little bit of time, feeling punkish in some way, um, I wouldn't design in any sort of meaningful capacity.
I mean, that's fair, right? And I this is something I've heard reflected in a lot of people's stories. Is like they may not that people of our age, right? It's just the timing of the thing. Probably the first game you
Mm-hmm.
experienced was AD&D. Like there is an element of nostalgia. That shit coming back at a very particular time makes sense. It's when you hit a certain age and you're looking into
Yeah,
games again. Okay, that's fair. But that's not really what appealed to people, and that's especially within like our little tiny slice of the design world, where like most of us do some kind of work within the space. Um, the people who got started there, it's just this idea that like, oh, I don't have to make a 400-page full color book,
yeah,
right? Like
yeah,
I can create
um,
something digestible, and that is a sufficient product.
yeah. Like, are you a sports fan at all? Do you watch sports in
Hockey,
any meaningful way?
hockey's the only one.
Okay. Um, I'm like so. I casually enjoy sporting events, and like I remember a few years ago that football player Odell Beckham
Mm-hmm.
had this like crazy catch. He like reached behind his head and caught the football, right?
Yeah.
And it was something that no one had ever seen before, right? Like, and it got played thousands of times. And now you see it in like high school games, right? Because there was this element of like, once people saw that, they were like, oh, you can do that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, it was just, there was this sort of joint realization that the human body could do that, thought about it.
Yeah.
And I think that that's true for anyone in design, or at least for me in design, where like, and I think I'm pretty normal in this fashion, where um, I'm not a creative person in terms of like being able to come up with something out of the blue. Like
Sure.
there's if I see a blueprint for something, I can expand upon that in a hopefully interesting way. Um, and that's so like I can point to specific things in my life that have been that. Like, you know, we mentioned the OSR previously. Um, but like I remember Dread being one of
Mm-hmm.
those things too. Like when I saw Dread the first time, or when I saw some of Avery's stuff, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like Quiet Year, like these were things that were sort of like sea changes for me of just like, oh shit, you don't need to use dice. Why didn't I think of that?
Yeah.
Like that's tight, right? You know. So uh, yeah, I mean, I those are the things that I sort of think about consistently in terms of what changed for me in terms of wanting making me want to explore more
Sure.
for my own capabilities. You know?
I mean, I so games like Dread, games like Quiet Air, that side slice of the hobby is actually much more where I associate you. I don't.
Yeah,
It didn't like I was aware of you before I knew you had any connection to the OSR historically.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. I think I was sort of tangentially related there. I don't know.
well, I
Yeah,
mean, as somebody who like comes into the production side of the hobby through that, like that, I was just like, I thought you were somebody who came in through like Metatopia or some like deeply indie side of the space because I think the first exposure to you I had was the like I mean you're to go to Judaism, right? Your games collection in that vein. I
yeah.
yeah, I just it blew my mind when I first realized I was like, oh shit, he plays just like regular ass people games too, because I thought you were like firmly in the like deeply philosophical art game space as like your core.
Yeah.
Um,
I think that that's really interesting. So like I remember, and I don't remember if you were sort of there specifically at the time, but I remember when we were all playing Rasmus End at
yeah, with Alicia,
what the hell was that stupid? Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
unplugged.
at PAX, and we were sort of introducing ourselves and what we did, and I I like sort of sheepishly introduced myself as someone like in the lyric game milieu, I guess, you
Yeah.
know, but yeah, I don't know. Like I certainly, and I mean, maybe this is a running theme throughout this interview, and I don't want to come across as someone who like constantly beats up on myself because, like, Lord knows, like, I have a pretty healthy ego about my writing capability. Like, I feel like I'm pretty insightful. And, like, I've been more successful than most on an objective level. But like, I don't think when I look at what uh, people like Riley or people like Jay Dragon or like all those people are doing, like I look at what they're writing and I'm like, this is way more like poetic and abstract and interesting than the way my brain works. You know, like
I mean, like, sure, right?
I
Are you
yeah.
Joyce? Are you Proust? Like, maybe not, but you're not
Oh
Stephen King,
yeah,
right? Like, there's a gulf in
yeah,
there. Um,
yeah. I hope I'm Wallace Shawn. I think that's
that
what
would
I
be
hope.
tight.
Just
I
like a
mean, I
yeah.
think you could pull off a mean Wallace Shawn for Halloween one year. Um, uh, yeah, I mean,
For a while that was my only goal in writing anything was to write and get famous enough where I could uh, theoretically get Wallace Shawn to eat dinner with me and we could talk about our work. That was my only goal in any creative output that I had.
Small obtainable goals, man. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, so let's talk about your work, right? Like, we've
Okay.
kind of been
Yeah.
like circling around. So I mean, you have a host of things. I mean, well, do you want to work from the kind of beginning forward? Do you want to work from like what's on the fire back? I'm down either way. Um,
Um, yeah, I mean, I guess the three things that people know theoretically, right, are um, Cementville, the Doikayt,
mhm.
and the Towns Van Zandt stuff. So,
Mhm.
I mean, uh, we can talk about all three of them. I don't care about order. You think you pick what's most interesting to you. If you want to talk about wrestling stuff too, we can.
Yeah,
I don't
no, I
know
mean
the
that's
audience.
absolutely. I will say that so you got backed at a level that had somebody submit questions. Our mutual friend Jeff Stormer, who is
Yeah.
also a wrestling nerd, um, asked them. They touch on wrestling in at least one of them, so that's just gonna happen. Um, yeah, I mean, like let's
Okay, for sure.
I don't know. Start now, moving backwards. Towns Van Zandt, like
Yeah, of course.
weird
Um,
project. I'm
all right.
holding it up. Um,
I think we're all holding it up. So, um, we're gonna the project that we're referring to is the Rain on a Conga Drum, which is the Towns Van Zandt based collection of tabletop RPGs that you are part of. Dave Cox is a part of, and Riley is a part of, and then I have multiple games in there. So I'm doing three games, and then the guest writers are all doing one. Two of the three for me are done, and then the third, I it's all up here right now. Um, uh, so I think we're all holding it up in our own fashion. Um, the yeah, so I mean, I think that's a good place to start for what I think either I'm good at or what I think I'm most comfortable with, which may not be the same thing.
sure.
Um, but uh, I like being inspired by non games and trying to grapple with their meaning by gamifying them in some
Okay.
way, which I think is an important part of my process. And, uh, I think that because it works for me, it's something that I like to share with people. So, like, I did it for a Wallace Shawn play. I did it for um, the what was that? The public domain game jam where they gave out the prizes that they
Libra
did a couple of years
Libra
back now.
Baskerville.
No, 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 not that one. The one they did for Tech Dirt, like Tech Dirt held a game jam. I don't
Oh yeah,
remember
yeah.
anymore. Yeah. So I like taking things that exist and trying to create a game that will be a representation of what that piece of art was prior to it being a game. And I think that maybe I do it in a more I don't know if literal is the right word, simulationist maybe
Okay.
fashion than some other people would, but um, I think that that's something that I like to do. I think that's something that I'm uh, currently enamored with as a designer. I enjoy taking the things that I like, in this case, Towns Van Zandt's music, things that make me feel stuff, um, and trying to create or design a piece that is going to elicit the same feelings from other people who maybe have never heard the work before, you know? Um, and I think that's, in my opinion, something that's really powerful about games, right? I mean, it's really powerful about all art, but
Sure.
like we think about games often in the the places that they can take us, like the stories that we can tell
Mm-hmm.
and the feelings that we get when we tell those stories that are largely that we're in control of, right? Whereas art that is that we listen to or that we watch or that we read um, is art that leads us down a specific path theoretically. And I like sort of bridging the gap between those two things in some way, right? Because I think control within art is a really interesting thing to think about and grapple with. And so when you sort of merge those two things, that's my shit. That's my jam.
I mean, that's pretty lofty, right? Like how did you discover that was your shit, right? Did you just wake up one day and went, I want to bridge the gap between two fundamentally distinct medias that speak to me in very different ways, but both are very powerful? Like, is that just the kind of thing that happens in your brain late at
Right.
night, or
Yeah. So I guess the the real answer, and this I say this not to be self-deprecating again, but I say this to be sort of introspective about my own limitations as a creative, right? Is like especially because I'm uh, writing about existing things, right? Like my wrestling writing is essentially art critique, right?
sure?
So I think that just the way that my brain works is I try and be insightful about things that are pre-existing rather than the way that maybe other designers' brains work, where they can create something out of nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so for me, it was always easier on some level to take something that was pre-existing and spoke to me and then make that into a game that hopefully spoke to people in the same way,
Yeah.
right? Um, to do adaptation essentially.
Yeah, no, I mean, I both share that personally, and yeah, I think of it as editorial art, right? Like, nothing terrifies me more than a blank page, but you can give me a 70-page document, and I will tear through that and do line edits and developmental edits with, like, no hesitation. Um, I can complete a
Yeah,
sentence without thinking, but
which
to
is
start.
interesting. Yeah, which is it's very interesting that you say that because I think that maybe I'm in between the two, right? If there's such a thing as a spectrum between those 2 points, um, because I am not a good editor. Um, like in terms of technical proficiency or being able to tell someone why something is bad or why something is good is not a strength of mine as a writer compared to many other people. For example, on Doikayt, like we hired an editor because I just I have no it wasn't I knew that it would be something that I would fail at. Um, but that being said, like I gave feedback on all the games because like I'm good at 30,000 feet viewing,
Sure.
right? I'm not necessarily good at ground level stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I think that the point remains. I mean, I a blank page doesn't terrify me. Like I like let's say this, I like parameters. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Um, yeah, I like lines because I'm a line stepper. And so
Okay.
if I don't know what rules to bend or break, then I have trouble identifying where to begin.
Okay. That's a good way to put it.
Okay.
Um, okay, so speaking of Doikite, right? Like,
Yeah.
I would say that was the major thing that I associate you with. I mean, that's saying something since I don't think it's out yet.
Yeah, right.
Um,
I hope we don't shit the bed. It should be out very, very soon.
okay.
Um, all the games are done. Uh, we're waiting on finalized cover art, and like I think that there's minor layout things that that's it.
Sure. Okay, so what? So
So
firstly, what is
yeah,
Doikayt, and then how do you arrive at a project like that?
yeah. So the Doikayt is a collection of Jewish tabletop RPGs that are all roughly, generally, for people on this who are watching this still understand this, they're roughly in the story slash lyric game realm.
Sure.
Um, they're all shorter games in the 1,500 to 2,500 word range. Games that can be played over the course of an evening.
Mm-hmm.
Light arts, uh, things like that. They're all from Jews. Everyone that has worked on the project is Jewish. Artists and uh, editors, everybody. Were it was something that was put together mostly by me and Riley. We talked about the it's sort of funny. We talked about the idea because we had both written Jewish games that had, I mean, received some minor acclaim, I guess, in their own weird way. And so we were talking just about doing a full collection. And I had said, I remember when we started this, I had said like, oh well, let's just sort of like kick the can down the road. We'll just pitch ideas and stuff for a while. And she actually was like, I my attention span is so bad that if we don't do this right now, then like we're never gonna do it. I just know myself.
Okay.
So uh, we really sort of threw it together. We put out like open call essentially. We took pitches, and then once we had pitches finalized enough that we were comfortable, we were going to have a compelling product. We hired artists. We launched a Kickstarter. We timed our Kickstarter out for BadCon, which I think was probably helpful because both of us were there. It was sort of a celebration of games like that, and and then we were off to the races. And yeah, I mean, I think that there's really, really great games in there. Adira Slattery's game is really incredible. I think it's awesome. It's one of my favorite games I've read this year. Riley has a game in there that's very good. Who else? Lucian Khan is involved. Yeah, I mean, a lot of really, really good designers, and designers that I think are really good, that are well known within our circle, that I'm hoping maybe because of this get a slightly larger platform that they had. So
I mean, that's always the hope, right? Um,
yeah.
so how do you first? Okay, so just to check, Riley's the person you've collaborated the most with at this point, right?
Yeah, I mean, we our major collaboration has been this, and
Sure.
I think we collaborated really well. And we have, she's a guest writer on the TVZ collection
Yeah.
too. But yeah, mostly I work by myself, simply
Sure.
because I don't trust myself to meet deadlines for other people.
Same. So
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I uh,
Um,
I met a deadline for Dave. I really got out of bed for that one.
oh
The
yeah. Eat
trash be
trash.
free. I
Yeah.
got that in on time.
I got a draft in, and then one day he messaged me on Discord, just being like, "Dude, I'm just gonna do the edits myself. Can you just like pick up the phone and we'll talk through them?" And I was like, "Sure, that works." Um,
Yeah. For mine on there, he's like, this is really great. It is like 200 words over what I told you to write. So can you like tone it back, please? I don't need like the lore of my
yeah,
own fucking
yeah.
game.
Um, I think the problem was Cecil submitted his like before anyone else, and Cecil doubled the word count, and then everyone just used that as a template.
Right.
It's just like I can't. Like everybody has to cut half of theirs. Um,
Yeah.
okay, so how long after you started did how long after you started being a designer, right? Being a practicing designer, did Doikayt
Yeah.
come around? Was that 2, 3 years?
Um, I guess so. I'm trying to think. Um, so I had I did a lot of uh like I guess not official designing. Like I until it was probably a year, I guess, in the official.
I mean, let's.
I did a lot in the OSR scene. I did a lot of like contributionary work, I
Sure.
guess, but not. I didn't have like a book of my own,
I
like
mean,
the people that you know from that scene. Yeah,
to an extent, I think that's an immaterial distinction, right? It's a distinction without difference.
sure, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Like what's
yeah.
the difference between being a collaborator on something like Petty Gods, where like that might be your only credit in
Right,
a text, right? But that's still writing. You're still in a book. Um, or like
yeah,
how do I piece out Glog, right? Glog's been going for like the better part of a decade, and there still isn't a book. Um,
yeah.
so it's a very fuzzy distinction. I mean, so I guess
Yeah,
the question for me
absolutely.
is like, how do you go from like contributing writer on some like OSR shit to
Hmm.
in especially at the time, right? I think now the distinction has been blurred. There have been lines that have been crossed. I mean, the entirety of what we ended up calling Sword Dream is basically the experiment of merging the OSR and the lyric game scene. Um, there are things
Yeah,
that connect those spaces, but certainly at the time they were the opposite ends of the
oh,
world.
I. Yeah, you cut out there a tiny bit for me after Sword Dream.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, our connection is less than perfect, but it'll catch. So yeah, like you're over here, right? This is
Yeah,
this is OSR, and then at the time, far end of the world is over here, which is where you kind of end up, right? Making these deeply
yeah,
personal games that operate more in the lyric game space, right? You have
yeah.
people who like bridge those gaps, but how do you personally go from here to here?
Yeah, sure. So the answer is very specific. And and it may not be a super popular one because I think they've fallen out of vogue, but um I would not be where I am. I don't think I ever would have delved into the scene or created things in the fashion that I create them without ranked or prize based jams on it.
Fair.
Um, because I mean, I'll be honest, like I like feedback in the terms of like combat against my peers, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, if I can't create something for the masses until I understand my voice and my place for the masses,
Mm-hmm.
right? So like uh wrestling writing for me to get into my sort of other life here, like I can write about like I can just put stuff out at this point because like I know my readership. I know that it'll be well received by X people, right? Um for games, I didn't have that. And so I was afraid to, I don't know, afraid is a strong word, but I had no desire to just sort of like create something, put it out, and not understand my readership or whatever,
Sure.
right? Like that doesn't do it for me in any way, shape, or form. So they when that public domain jam happened and there was I mean the judges for that were sort of a who's who of people that I looked up to and respected that I knew were going to read my game, right? um, I really sort of worked to format and create something that I thought was going to be or that I could be proud of, I guess, in some way, right? And if I could finish that and give it to them, and if it was received on some level, then I knew I would be uh, on my way, right? Like
Sure.
that was enough of a get up and go for me, you know? And I think that's true of other game jams as well that have been really popular, like um, Tunnel Goons, for example, right? Like, I don't think that whole thing, I mean, Tunnel Goons is a great system, uh, but I think part of the enjoyment and why it got the contributions it did was people wanting to see how they stacked up, right?
Sure.
I understand that like creation for creation's sake is sort of the what we're doing as designers or what a lot of people in this space are doing, and I think that's really important. But I also think that it's important that every once in a while we get feedback from our peers in like a really binary way of like this is good and this is bad, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, truthfully, like if when I submitted God of Vengeance to that first Tech Dirt Jam for the public domain stuff, like if that hadn't been well received, right? Like we probably wouldn't be having this conversation, right? Like I probably would have faded into obscurity on some level, or remained in obscurity, I guess. But um,
I mean, this is the
sometimes
joke, right? Like the joke is
right.
pretty much everyone in this space just is somebody who got some positive feedback at one point, and like that's it.
Yeah, absolutely, right? Absolutely. Um, like I loved what I like. Lucien Kahn the other day tweeted about all of his novel rejections, and like submitting novels and stuff and having nothing accepted, and then submitting game ideas, right? And and sort of getting, I mean, nearly universal praise because he's a tremendous game
Mm-hmm.
designer, right? And it's I mean, it's similar in some ways. I mean, there's just sort of there's a dopamine factor to it, right?
Yeah.
Like we all want the feedback from our peers, you know. Um, I mean, I'll be honest about it. I think anyone who's not, there's probably people that don't care about their peers, but I think for me, if I told you that like I don't give a shit about what people thought about what I write, I'd be lying to you, you
Yeah.
know?
No, I feel that. I think often even if they don't want praise, they still feel some sort of way. It's the rare individual who creates genuinely in a vacuum. I think there are a few of them. I could probably name a
Absolutely,
few,
there are.
but like by and large, I don't think that's the case. And I think that you see that
Yeah,
occur. I think that's how we arrive at a place where you're right. A harsh competitive criticism has fallen out of vogue in a big way. Um, I think there
yeah,
is the drive to experience the praise that brings people into the design space is very strong, and it's reasonable that people don't like the other side of it. But that doesn't mean we don't need it,
sure.
like, or that we don't benefit from it.
Yeah. There's something really interesting. Like you have a and I apologize if this thought isn't fully formed because it sort of just occurred to me.
Please,
But
no, that's way
one of the
better.
interesting things about one of the things that's interesting about this scene to me, and it's been like this for a while now, it's not new, is that our heroes are extremely accessible, right? Like they're the differences between the people we look up to when we haven't designed anything and the and us are minimal, right? They're minimal in a material sense and they're minimal in an emotional sense, right? Like the difference between a successful designer and a no name is like 200 sold copies of something, right?
Basically,
Like
yeah.
that's nothing. Uh, yeah, the difference, between someone emotionally is someone who's just been around for 4 more months or something, like um, so you're sort of immediately accessible to the people that you're looking up to, right? And it's enough turnover where you can find yourself in a place of um, hierarchy very early on in a career. I don't necessarily think that's healthy, but it's a reality
Hmm.
of our little DIY indie scene. It's true in punk, by the way, too.
Hmm.
I mean, I sort of go back to punk every once in a while, and like I remember, uh, at the risk of being canceled, I guess, like I was a very big part of the Planet X folk punk community in Bloomington in the Midwest, and I was pretty close to Chris Clavin. And I remember being at a show one time where he was playing, and he said, uh, he's like, "Oh, this next song is about all of the generations of punks that you see, where like you stay in the scene and." You see people who think they're going to be in the scene forever just come and go and leave your lives, and then he just pauses and he looks at the audience and he goes, so that's anyone that's been here for longer than 6 months, uh,
Yeah.
and it's true in this world as well, right? That there's people that have written incredible games or people that are more talented than me as a designer or whatever that uh, just had their creative juices go in a different direction.
Hmm.
They decided to go to grad school or whatever, and they can't write games anymore.
I mean, it's
They don't have the time.
game designers are here for a good time, not for a long time. Like,
Yeah,
they're just
the
you.
people that are here for a long time are all awesome, by the way, right? Like
I mean,
that's also a genuine thing.
some of them are. let's
Yeah.
let's not
All right. So,
let's not generalize that too much because that gets into pretty
all
dicey
right.
territory.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. You're right. All right. I rescind that statement. Yeah, sure.
um,
I was thinking of like the bakers and Epi
sure,
specifically when
yeah,
I said that.
they're great. Um,
Yeah.
those two like dyads of
Yeah.
Meg and Devence and Epi and oh fuck, what's her name? Romance trilogy. Emily Kerboss. Um,
Yeah.
like great people, lovely people, have
Yeah.
been around
Absolutely.
forever and just keep doing really
Yeah.
good work. Um,
Yeah.
there is definitely an other side. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean there is a transience to this business.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess how does that stack up? So like the other world that you were very in, as you've mentioned, is wrestling, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I assume that is something that predated your involvement in a serious way with games.
Yeah. I mean, I guess in terms of enjoyment, it's probably there's a conjunction, right? Like
Okay.
they're uh yeah, I've liked them both for roughly the same amount of time. I would say that in terms of like contributing seriously to one or the other, like probably wrestling was the thing I dipped my toes into earlier than game design, or at least the thing that I got um applause for earlier.
Okay.
um the To put it into terms of the that people listening to this will understand, I was a uh you know contributing poster to the like wrestling equivalent of the Forge, I guess, right?
Okay.
When I was in in my college years, right? And then from there, and I guess still to this day, I'm like pretty close with the the people from that era.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I'm associated with them and have sort of a tastemaker reputation in the same general realm as those people.
Okay.
Um, so that's the closest comparison I can think of. Um, yeah, I started writing about wrestling and my own experiences, not as a wrestler, just as a wrestling fan. Um, uh, in a, I don't know. I mean, outside of message boards, I probably started putting up like essays and stuff like that in 2014, 2015, somewhere around there.
Okay.
So it's been a little bit longer since people started saying like, "Oh, this guy knows what he's talking about." But that's a big fish in a small pond thing
Yeah.
because like 90% of people that are writing about wrestling are just like, "Oh, like I don't know, this is cool." like the pretty rare for there to be like consistent, insightful commentary.
Sure.
So I have a leg up on the competition just because I'm like I think about it in an unhealthy degree. It's like anything.
So, Stormer paid for him, so Stormer gets to go first. I have questions of my
Yeah,
own,
yeah, of course. Yeah,
but
yeah,
I'm gonna
for sure.
I'm gonna pull up Jeff's questions. All right. All right. First question: what can Negro
Yeah.
Casas teach us about game design?
Oh boy. All right. So for people who don't know, so Negro Casas is the wrestler that I think is the best wrestler of all time. Um,
Okay.
and he's the best wrestler of all time, uh, not because he's well, no, that's a bad way to say it. He's an outlier in really specific ways, right? Negro Casas debuted as a wrestler in 1983, and he's still an active wrestler, and he's still really, really good at what he does.
Okay.
Um, so think about that. Like, think about the active, like wrestling's an athletic activity, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like your average sports person, athlete has a career of what 5 to 10 years or something
Yeah.
as
Sure.
a prime. Like Negro Casas has been someone that you could say was never the best at what he did. There was never a point where you could say like, "Oh, this guy is clear cut the best wrestler in the world." You could make an argument for him for almost 40 years now. And so that's pretty exclamatory, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I don't think that that's necessarily what we learn about game design from Negro Casas. I think we would learn about game design from Negro Casas is that he is capable. One of his strengths as a performer is being active in moments where he is not the center of attention.
Okay.
So you have in Mexico, in Lucha Libre, the a lot of matches are based around trios. So it's 3 versus 3, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and Negro Casas is, if you watch him during one of these matches, where for the majority of the time he's probably spending on the apron watching wrestling matches, he's still involved and giving feedback and creative and caters his performance when he's in the ring to the stories that other people are telling around him. Um, and I think that that's a really important thing to keep in mind. You need to be organic when you're creating, and you need to look at what your peers are doing. Right? We've talked about contributing in a vacuum. We've talked about listening to what other people are doing. Um, we brought up the Forge briefly, and I guess Twitter has taken its place now. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, G Plus was in a similar way, but I think it's really important that you react and create in conjunction with the people that you're ostensibly in the ring with. Um, and so I think that's what Negrocossus can teach us. I think the secondary thing that Negrocossus can teach us is that I mean he's without being so in Mexico there's a a type of wrestler called an exotico,
Okay.
which is sort of a like a drag performer almost.
Okay.
And Negrocossus is not one of them. Uh, but I think that he toes the line and inverts things in a really interesting way. I think that he teaches us that even when you're sort of not in a position um, to be presented as a performer like that, you need to take notes from what other people are doing and internalize them and think about it. I think that there's stuff to learn from all aspects of the people that are in your creative hobby. I think that's what Negrocossus does really well.
Jesus, that is a way more interesting answer than I had. But I mean, I came
You
into
still
that.
there?
Yeah. Are you? Hello?
Oh,
Hello?
I lost you for a second there.
Okay, am I back?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
You're back.
Awesome. Huzzah. Um,
Good. All right.
and I got all of that. That was an excellent, excellent answer, by the
Good.
way. Like, I don't normally
Yes.
say shit like that. It's not my prerogative. That was genuinely a good answer. Okay.
Cool.
Second question from Stormer.
All
Where
right.
is the weirdest venue you've ever seen a wrestling show? And if you were to design a game using that space, what would it be about?
Oh boy. All right. Okay. So uh, I can tell you the first part of this question really, really quickly. I saw a match, like the whole card was in this place, but the match specifically was a match with a wrestler that named the Necro Butcher, that I guess was sort of the person I wrote about most for a period of time. Um, and I guess to get a full flavor, if you're listening to this or you're watching this, um, just like Google Necro Butcher wrestler and like look at a picture of him, and that'll like really inform you as to what I'm talking about. That's all you need to do. So he was wrestling someone. I can't even remember who. I apologize, but the venue was like in uh, an abandoned shopping mall in central Ohio. Um, and the the match like spilled uh, out of the ring and was just like all over this about to be demolished shopping mall in like a town that was like, you know, had no business having a shopping mall anymore, right? And like they were just like picking up ceiling tiles and smashing them in their faces and like, just like starting the demolition early, I guess, because I'm sure the people who owned this were like, yeah, go nuts, like whatever, it doesn't matter, right? Um, and so it was like a very surreal experience, I guess, right? Um, so I guess that's what I'll say. In terms of how I would design a game around that, oh boy, I don't know. I I mean, I think in some ways I did design a game around that called Cementville, where it's that same feeling of just being like a poor Midwest, right? You just happen to have magic powers at the same time. Um, but so I guess, yeah, I mean, I hadn't thought about that till now, but that did sort of inform that in some way. I mean, I like the idea. I guess the mechanical idea I would take from that experience is, um, getting uh not bonuses, but like mechanically doing things with found objects in the space that you're in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And destruction of found objects being the thing that marks progress. So that's how I would design it, right? That you're creating a game of combat or progress or campaign in some way where the things that you see around you and the items that you collect and pick up must be dispatched and destroyed in a literal fashion against the person that you're up against in some way.
I like it. It's good.
All right.
All right. Last question from Stormer. Okay, change of pace. Gangrel has invited you to his private game of Vampire the Masquerade. Who do you hope is at the table?
Oh God. All right. Oh Jesus. All right. Um, so Gangrel is a wrestler from the late '90s and early 2000s who's still wrestling. I think he has a wrestling school in Florida. He's also directed multiple pornographic films, from my understanding. Um, just to give you guys a picture of this. I think one is called Miami Rump Shakers. I'm almost positive that's the case, but you can fact check me on that. But uh, so Gangrel. All right. The only other thing you need to know about Gangrel is he's an active Twitter presence, and he has his own personal hashtag about when he works out, which is hashtag bangin' and bangin'. Um, all right. Okay, so I'm playing Vampire, playing some VTM with Gangrel. Um, shit. I don't like Vampire the Masquerade, so I don't want to answer this, but I don't know. Like, I wish I could answer and give you like specifics of like, oh, this person would be playing. What the name one of the stupid plans from that stupid game. I don't
Mal,
remember any of them.
yeah, Malkavian. That's the one I always remember. They're the
Sure,
crazy
yeah, right.
ones.
Yeah, all right. So this person would be a Malkavian. I mean, Gangrel is one of them, right?
Yeah,
So like
Gangrel
like I'm
is
pretty sure
a clown.
Gangrel would probably be playing a Gangrel, right? Um, let's say John Malkovich is playing Malkavian because those two words sound the same.
Malk. All right.
Um, and then I'm there. Are there Jewish vampires? I'll play a Jewish
I'm
vampire.
sure.
I
I'm
remember,
certain.
yeah. I remember when I was a kid, being like really weirded out about all the Vampire the Masquerade stuff because all the like onks and shit had like these crosses. There was and like I remember this goth girl in the game store I went into when I was a kid, like lecturing me about Roman Catholic onks, and I'm like, I legitimately don't care about any of this, right? But when you're like 12, you can't say that to somebody. When you're 30, you can say that to somebody. Um, but oh Jesus, who else do I want to? Wallace Shawn. I'm gonna play. I'm gonna play with John Malkovich, Gangrel, Wallace Shawn, and LeBron James. I'm from Ohio.
Fuck
Those
it.
are the
There you
those are
go.
the people. Yeah, there we go.
All right, Jeff. I hope you got your money's worth.
I feel like that last question turned into a good answer.
It did.
Truthfully, I'm proud of that one. Yeah.
You really pulled that one out.
Yeah.
All right. Cool.
I
Well,
wonder if I can get a podcast together with that. Like, maybe I can make that happen.
do you think you can get LeBron James, Wallace Shawn, and John Malkovich to play Vampire the Masquerade with a wrestler and porn director? Go ahead. That would be
Probably.
if you could pull that off.
Yeah.
Feat of
I
the
uh,
century.
I am so the year I got married was the year I'm from Cleveland, in case anyone doesn't know. and I'm immensely proud of the fact. Was the year that the Cleveland Cavaliers won the championship, and I got married on July 1st, and they won it like 10 days prior. And I tweeted to LeBron that he had an invite to my wedding, um, uh, because he won the championship.
Mhm.
He didn't show, weirdly enough, um, but he had an open invite, so
It's
I
fair.
don't know. If LeBron, if you're listening, it extends to this game of Vampire the Masquerade.
Just get a one thumbs up on the YouTube video later, and it's from LeBron James. It's the only person who votes on the
Oh,
video.
that'd be so sick.
Um, I don't know. That I feel like that was a really good end. I've like I
Oh yeah, I
wanted I
mean we
wa-
can keep
I
going.
want to keep talking. Um I'm trying to figure out what else to ask about.
All right. Do you mind if I get one more beer
No, no,
and
no.
you can think
Totally.
for like
Go
two
ahead.
seconds?
Yeah.
All
I
right.
mean, do we
Yeah.
do we want to like take a bio break and like come back in like a few minutes?
Yeah, sure. I mean that's fine. I'll
Okay.
be here.
Tight.
2 minute bio break.
Sounds good.
No, we're taking a 2 minute bio break. How was your workout? Yeah. Am I too loud? Okay.
All right. I'm back. I just noticed that apparently OBS tells you the number of dropped frames in a recording, and I'm at
Oh,
65.5%. So
that's probably fine,
it's
right?
totally,
That's
totally,
probably fine.
yeah, whatever. It'll be good.
Yeah. Who cares?
I'll piece
Yeah.
this together like digital archivist. It's
Yeah.
good. This was fun. This is a good combo. All right, so let's get back to it.
All right.
I don't know
I'm an open
what's
book.
yeah
Yeah.
what's coming up other than ran on a Congo. Like
So I yeah, I don't I truthfully don't know. So the when I finish Rain on a Conga Drum, I'll see if I'm like still invigorated by finishing that project. It's interesting. So I started three different projects at three very different times, and I think they're all gonna come out within like 3 weeks of each other,
Okay.
probably. Um, so like Rain on a Conga Drum, Doikayt, and a wrestling zine that I worked on for a while. That's uh just a collection of essays I did on this one wrestler and despicable human being named Ian Rotten are all gonna come out at at in a very sort of short order. And so I think that there'll be like a logistical hangover, like because I don't like shipping things
Hmm.
and stuff like that. It's annoying. Um, like I don't like people getting the things that they paid me for. Um,
Just pay me.
yeah, just pay me, right? Like that's uh so once that happens, I don't know. I may like sleep for a little bit, but when that happens, my work will actually be less busy. So theoretically, I will be like I'll have more time to be creative.
Hmm.
Um, the the major game project that I have on the back burner, and everyone laughs when I tell them this, or just sort of stares at me, is like a serial number filed off Pretty Little Liars TTRPG.
Yeah, immediate
Uh,
reaction was to laugh.
yeah, of course, right? Um, but I have actually like a pretty significant amount of work done on it. Um, but like it's one of those things of like I I'm really not sure what to do with it because I don't want to just release it because I think that it needs like a book that's nice and specific components to play.
Mhm.
So I want to kickstart it, but I don't want to kickstart or like crowdfund uh, a game that is just like so obviously based on something that I can't say the name to.
Mhm.
Um, but I also like don't think that like that me specifically going to the writers or creators of Pretty Little Liars and being like, "Hey, I want to make a fucking game based on your shit," is gonna go real good.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of stuck between a rock and a hard place. I'll talk about the mechanics if you'd like.
Go
I mean,
ahead.
I could.
I'm
I've got a lot.
fascinated. What the hell does that even look like?
Yeah. All right. So are you familiar with the conceit of the show or like the plot of the
Yes.
show or the books at all? Okay.
Yes, but
Right.
like there are people
So
who are watching slash reading in the future who aren't, so may as well. Go ahead.
cool. All right. All right. So it's the idea of, of this insanely stupid show that I love is there's these girls who are essentially like the mean girls in high school. Like they're
Hmm.
all different archetypes of mean girls. There's like the jock mean girl and the smart mean girl and the artsy mean girl, right? And they're all friends with like the queen bee mean girl who goes missing one night, right? And then uh, they all disperse after she goes missing, right? They grow apart, and then they come back together for her funeral because she's been missing so long that she is presumed dead by her family. And then they all get anonymous text messages that say, like, we know what you did, right? Like, I'm watching you, et cetera, and so forth, right? And because all of these girls have hella secrets, they all take it to heart and make a lot of bad decisions. A lot of bad decisions. Um, They're also in high school for like 9 years, by the way.
Yeah.
But so the game that I've created, there's two major mechanics based on this, where you essentially play like a high school archetype, right?
Okay.
Uh, and the archetype that you have allows you to uh, in some ways it's very similar to like a belonging outside belonging style thing where you have strong moves and weak moves.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that allow you to interact with different people in different fashions, right? So like the artsy girl can interact with different adults and different teens in different fashions than the jock girl, for example, or the jock guy, right?
Sure.
Or the whatever. Um, so that's sort of one mechanic, and then weak moves or things, complications, so to speak, um, allow any player. It's GMless to create a text message for the group, right? And that's how the story progresses. Uh, so whenever you do a quote unquote weak move, for lack of a better term, you want to add a complication rather than solving any situation.
Mm-hmm.
You announce sort of what you do to screw up or whatever, and you send a text message to everybody. Everybody gets the same text message, and then in addition to that, you can send a secret text message to any one player, right? Because occasionally players will get different, or in the show, characters will get different text messages that give people conflicting goals, right?
Okay.
There'll be text messages that say, um, you know, don't don't do this, right? Make your friends fail, and then I won't reveal this secret about you, right? Because the text message sender knows all, right? Um, so that's part of it,
Are
right?
these
The other
literal text messages?
No, the I have it done via just you can say out loud, and then you can send a secret one via just writing a note card to somebody.
Okay.
Um, I don't actually like electronics at the table, so I try and limit it. You know, um, I know that text message game just came out and it looks super cool, but I don't want to actually have people on their phones. Um, the and then the other aspect of it, the other sort of major mechanic is how sort of any check is done if there's doubt about anything, right? And there's not a GM, so it's sort of amorphous at this point in terms of what constitutes doubt. Is there's a table, and you can just sort of put out like a little map that you can draw, or hopefully the game will provide one. And then the game, when I sell it, will also have um, magnets, like the little pieces of magnetite, like the
Mm-hmm.
little rare earth magnets. Um, and so whenever you do something that can succeed or fail, you will put down magnets on the board, right? If they stick together, it's a failure, right? So the idea